Welcome to a special edition of the Arizona Project. Serving Arizona since 2009, defending Arizona, America, and fellow citizens against leftism, liberalism, and the deep state. And now, here's your host, Ronald Others.
Hello, everybody. We're doing something very different tonight. It's our usual night here at the Arizona Project, and we usually have guests, and we have a full room down in the classroom. Tonight's different. We all know it, and the reason for it is our president has asked us not to meet in groups of any larger than 10, and we found that was unworkable for us, and we tried to find another way of doing things, and we believe we have that way. So we're hoping you're all joining us tonight. It's a very important night. There are 5 of us in the studio, so we're even better than the national average of don't meet with more than 10 people. Well, as you know, the whole world is essentially on lockdown due to this virus. And I want to introduce our guest tonight. We have Senator Michell Ugenti. Welcome, Michelle.
Hello, thank you.
And we also have Connie Steele is here.
Hi.
And then we have a very, very special guest on the line. We have Dr. Brian Scott from Lake Havasu City. And I met him last week. We had him on the show last Wednesday, I believe. And I've asked him if he would mind coming on again because he mentioned a lot of wonderful things that Americans are doing, and I found that people are doing this around the world. And that is, this is a very serious disease. I know over the past I've heard people say this is a hoax, this is not real, we're overreacting to it. And when I met Dr. Scott, and we spoke yesterday, Doctor, and I mentioned that one of the little secrets that most people don't know is that this disease was 5 times more contagious than any of the diseases that we have out there, in the flu and other types of viruses. And then you actually corrected me and said you had heard that it was even more so. Could you discuss that with us for a few minutes about the severity of this disease and how easy it is to,
Sure.
if we don't do the social distancing, what can happen to us?
Sure. I think it's important to kind of start with the social distancing and why this is so important. You know, we've all probably gone to the news outlets and we've seen all of these graphs and all of this information. And what we're trying to do is, if everybody gets sick in the United States at the same time due to this intense infectivity that this virus has, we will overwhelm our medical systems and people will unnecessarily die that we normally could save. So it's important for us to basically flatten the curve, meaning extend out when people get sick. And so what's interesting is I called a good friend of mine and I said, hey, how are you taking this? And he told me, well, it's just a flu, right? And I couldn't understand how such a smart individual thought this was just like the everyday flu. I mean, in some respects it is, except for it's much more infective. It also has an ability to really infect the lower respiratory tract, meaning that people are getting intubated or on ventilators, which normally you wouldn't see that as often with the regular flu. So it was interesting. He told me, he said, well, I feel like the news has lied to me for the last 20 years, and I really don't trust them now. And so I thought that was very interesting. So somehow we have to alert people to not freak out, not become panicked, but we have to give them enough information that they're scared enough to actually do what they're supposed to do, which is social separation. 6 feet between everybody. When you go to somebody's house, yes, you can stand 6 feet away from them, but you're only as safe as those people have been, so their germs are all over their house, or maybe you brought germs into their house. So if you want to meet up with people, go to somewhere deserted, and you guys bring your own chairs and 6 feet apart from each other, and sit there and don't touch anything.
Wow.
That'd be the way you do it. Now, I wanted to throw out this. Now, I have to tell you, it's a bit of a hearsay, but I want to tell you why the hearsay is important, okay?
Yes, sir.
We physicians are members of different groups, and they're only attended by, online by other physicians. So you have to figure that whatever we're getting is probably not a lie through these groups. These are other physicians. I just received, no more than 10 minutes ago, a post that was placed by a resident. Now, when I say a resident, when you go into medical school, then you become a resident in a residency program, and then you become a fellow. These are the steps. So these are physicians when I say resident. This resident was reporting out of Manhattan, and I won't read you the post because, frankly, I don't want to scare you. But the gist is that many people that are young are getting intubated, left and right, they actually said, in Manhattan. The lack of personal protective equipment is forcing physicians to practice with reusing masks and reusing anything they can. They're even saying at this point they'll put a bandana over their mouth if they have to because they're out of masks. They're stating that they're having just gobs of patients come through the doors and require urgent care so they don't die. This is a real emergency. It's not fake. It's not made up. It's happening in Las Vegas. I've heard there's a lot of increased sickness going on there. Certainly no California, but obviously New York area and all those areas are being hit hard. We have to do whatever we can to prevent that curve from spiking. We need to flatten the curve.
Wow, that's pretty scary. Now I did something today in preparation for this evening. As I mentioned earlier, we usually have a meeting in our meeting room on Monday night, and we tried to find a way, because we got to get news out to people, and we have a lot of other things that the senator's going to be speaking about that don't relate to this, and it's things that the public needs to know. But I got up there and I went to the TV, and I was watching the numbers. I've been an accountant most of my life, so I look at numbers, and I saw the cases at 9 a.m. Okay, they had reported in, and of course these numbers, I don't know what time they're reporting, but at 9 a.m. we had in the United States, we had 35,530 cases of this. By noon, we had 40,961. We'd jumped 500 cases in 3 hours, and then by 1 p.m., another hour later, we were at 41,708. That's pretty scary, from 35,000 to 41,000 in a 4-hour period.
That's because of testing. That's because of testing, though. That's not necessarily the spread of the virus. That's because testing is becoming more widespread. So we're starting to know how many Americans are already infected. I watched the governor out there in New York, and I thought it was an interesting statistic that his experts have said that within by the time this is all done, 40 to 80% of Americans will have the COVID virus.
Wow.
But where our problem is not that 40 or 80%, it's the, maybe 10 or 20% that will need to be hospitalized. That's the problem.
Yes, I guess there are not enough beds, and the president sent 2 hospital ships, and what I guess about at least 2,000 additional beds, and they're wanting those hospital ships. They're not wanting to put COVID in there. They're wanting to put people that normally belong. Now, our very own Kelly here, Connie, is supposed to go in for some foot surgery in another week?
On Thursday. And I was still, to this last minute, we're waiting to see if I could go in. They're saying non-essential, but what's essential? Should I be able to walk?
The governor said today that all non-essential surgeries would be canceled. Now, I don't know what the governor knows that the hospitals don't know, but I don't know if he can do that.
Non-essential surgeries have a bigger impact than one would think. So not only do you unnecessarily put yourself at risk for a non-essential surgery, but also surgery requires personal protective equipment. So the utilization of PPE on non-emergent surgeries does not make any sense right now in our national emergency.
I see. Now it's interesting here. We have Senator Ugenti-Rita here, and it's kind of interesting. When I talked to her, I did not know that even the legislature is now recessed for. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. We are recessed until April 13th. So right now we've got a pause. All legislation has stopped. We did pass out a budget. But work, as people typically know it down at the legislature, has ceased, and we're not coming in. There have been changes to the rules to allow for remote voting.
We'll get into that.
We'll get into that. But yeah, so we're not down there either. The employees are told to work from home, except for maybe some people at certain times. But we also have to follow the protocols and.
So the Capitol is essentially a ghost town right now. Is that true?
Is a what?
The Capitol's a ghost town?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Like Jerome.
Yeah, that's pretty scary, because that's usually this time of year, the legislature's in session. And
in the middle of things, we're hustling and bustling.
Right, I mean, they're hustling for a budget, really begin to crank up the budget. And, as we talk about the budget, we've got some pretty scary things. When Doctor was on last time, we were talking about what's scarier, is the economic disaster or the medical disaster. And I think they're probably both pretty important. And I don't know what's going on. I wanted to talk about that for a minute, if I could indulge everybody. Those of you that are tuned in, you know that I'm a super conservative. You also know that I'm not very fond of the opposite side of the party, the leftists, the liberals, and Democrats in general, because Democrats have one philosophy that I have a great deal of trouble with. And Rahm Emanuel, when he was the chief of staff for Obama, he stated this, and I think this was Saul Alinsky, and just never let a good crisis go to waste. So what they've done here, to Democrats, everything is political. I'm sorry, if there's Democrats listening, I think you need to go to, hashtag walk away. Is that the
Walk away?
Yeah, walk away from the Democrat Party. Now, here's the thing. Yesterday, the House had passed some bills. The Senate was going over them. They stayed, and they were in session yesterday. 5 Republicans short, because they have tested positive for the virus. And so here's what the Democrats are trying to sneak in, okay? They're gaming the agenda. They want new EPA standards. They want new Green Deal standards. They want to expand abortions. They want tax credits for solar and wind generation. And all of these things are without debate. I mean, this stuff just comes up, it gets on your desk. You got 15 minutes to look over 1,000 pages and then vote on it. And then they wanted a new treatment for labor unions, new airline emission standards, and the expansion of Medicaid and Obamacare. This was all in the bill. Now, I listened to the president today, and I'm a great fan of the president, but I was very, very upset that he just didn't say on national television, Pelosi and Schumer, get your butts in here, sit down right here, and explain to the American people what's going on, why you've turned this into a political show, sideshow. And I say that from the bottom of my heart. I cannot believe this. And there's another guy, and many of you know who Jim Clyburn is. He's a Democrat. He's the majority whip in the House from South Carolina. He is a 14th term representative, and most of you know my feelings about people that make a career out of politics.
Term limits
and so forth. And he said, and I'm going to quote this, "This is a tremendous opportunity to restructure our priorities." I'm going to read that again because I stuttered. "This is a tremendous opportunity for us to restructure our priorities." Now, if I'm not mistaken, worldwide, I saw the numbers here. They were I think they're over 16,000. Is that correct, Doctor?
I think it's 15,000.
I think it's over 16,000, almost 17.
Total deaths. Yeah.
And 17,000 deaths, and we're playing politics? I mean, these people, there's got to be some way to get rid of these people. I mean, it just is so disturbing to me when we have this kind of a problem, and we turn it into a political circus, sideshow. Companies are going out of business. I know right here where we're at, there's several stores. The one right next door does ladies' pedicures and nails and
I think
whatever.
they're shutting everything down.
And they haven't been to work in 3 days. Now, granted, it was a weekend, but they do a tremendous business on Saturdays. They were closed Saturday, and they closed early on Friday. So these are people that are not making a living, and sooner or later, it's going to come back and haunt us if we can't get this gigantic catastrophe under control. Tell us a little more, Doctor. You were mentioning to me about a friend that had a father that was a elderly gentleman that had diabetes and so forth. And if you don't mind sharing that, of course, don't use the names.
Yeah. I think what I was trying to do is, again, I knew this person pretty well, so I'm not trying to incite, panic or fear, but I wanted to figure out, well, what will it take for me to get through to you and make you understand that what you do matters. If you do not participate in social distancing, it matters and will have an effect. And basically what I figured out with this gentleman, I know his father has diabetes. Don't quote me on the age. I think he's about 75 years old. He had been overweight, although I think he's lost weight. He's a smoker. And I said, this is the exact individual statistically. If they get COVID, they have a much higher chance of death. So if your children were at school, which they are not, but if you, your children, whatever, are not practicing social distancing and you inadvertently come home and infect, grandpa or your dad, you potentially could lead to their death. And again, not trying to incite fear and outrage, but this got to him. His next thing that he said to me, he said, wow, you know what? You just changed all of my practices right now. I'm changing everything I'm doing.
I thank you for sharing that with the audience. I was quite pleased with our discussion last week because some really remarkable things happened as the doctor and I spoke right on the air. The first thing the doctor was talking about is citizens coming to the aid of the medical profession and, of course, to their communities as well. And that was the making of masks. Now, since the discussion, Doctor, I did want you to know that Connie Steele here actually took the next day and was making masks. She worked so hard. She worked so hard that I had to give her the sewing machine that we had.
Yes, I broke mine.
She broke her machine making masks.
Yes.
Wow.
Do you have your mask here, Connie? Maybe
I have some over there, I think, by Arthur.
That's not good to have them over there. I can't see them, folks.
This didn't turn out very good, but this is one of the ideas. I was trying to pleat it so it would cover the face and have these little, like the ponytail ties to go around the ears. But I've had a lot of mistakes I've made learning the hard way. These would have to be much looser.
Well, hold them up so the audience can see.
So if you want to make your own, you can safely. And
oh, they just magically appeared on the desk. How did that happen?
I got good friends in high places. Well, anyways, this could be just a rubber band. If in a pinch, if you can't sew like I do, you can just staple it with a stapler and make sure they're going on the outside, otherwise you scratch your face. But I made them a little wider than the standard mask. And I was even thinking of making them all different colors, flesh colors, so everyone can have their own identity and not feel like, wow, she's got a blue mask on.
Does the material matter?
Well, I think rather than wearing nothing, I think that we should wear something.
Well, let the doctor explain this. The
But
N95.
yes, you're the expert doctor.
From my limited research, I'm not a mask maker, but what I have found is certainly high thread count, super high thread count, multiple layers, typically 3 layers sewn together. Some people have used, I've noticed online, I've read about coffee filters being utilized.
Interesting.
I've even, and none of these are, validated. I'm only telling you what I've read. So don't take this as, again, a cure-all or going to protect you from the COVID, but it certainly couldn't hurt. I've also read even like the material from vacuum bags may have such a high thread count. You think about it, right? You suck up all the dust and everything. Nothing gets out of a vacuum bag. So I've heard a lot of ingenuity go into these. So I would encourage you to kind of search around and figure out what the highest rated is. There's even hospitals now that have started to do this. Very interesting. Hey, and I'll throw out this too. I mean, hopefully, we'll have to all pray we never get to this, because certainly this is not FDA approved. But I went to some websites, and we know that ventilators are in mass shortage, right? You look everywhere, you know that. You know that companies are starting to repurpose and retool to be able to make ventilators. But how quickly can they actually put out ventilators when the likelihood is next week or within the next 2 weeks, we may need lots of them? I found places where engineers that are now bored and are at home are building for less than $100 makeshift ventilators that would work in a pinch. If we get to that point and we don't have them, how about American ingenuity and what we've already figured out, how to go down to Home Depot and basically build a ventilator for $100?
Well, if I may here, I'm going to give a plug, because I took your advice and I looked that up on the internet, and there's a website that has the ventilator. The name of, it's Instructables Workshop, and it's at www.instructables.com. Once again, that's www. Of course, we really don't need that anymore, but it's Instructables.com, and they actually showed how to make one of these things with a plywood base and so forth. You don't even have to be a metal worker. You can buy a piece of plywood and saw it and put some things together, and some hoses and some valves and so forth. I didn't quite understand how it all works. However, I mean, think about that. If you have somebody in your home that has this, and it's not serious enough for hospitalization, this can take a great deal of pressure off of the hospitals and yourself. I don't know that it's necessarily medical grade, but if it helps you breathe when you can't breathe, it works, if it'll work. So, and the other thing, Doctor, I was quite amazed today. I've been kind of glued to the TV so that we could talk today about this thing in a logical way, and I was really quite amazed that in Seattle they had such a shortage of these, that they did like you folks did in Lake Havasu City, and they asked the public to get together, and women's clubs and other organizations got together, and they made over 6,000 masks. Now the hospitals did provide them with the material and the instructions as to how to do it. They were so successful that the hospital says, okay, you can stop for the day. They wanted to keep going, but they made over 6,000 masks. And I find that this is what we need in this country now. In all of our wars, we've done this with victory gardens and salvaging tin cans and everything else during World War II. And this, as Donald Trump has said, we're actually at war. We're at war with an invisible enemy that can kill. And so I don't think at this point anybody should question this. I know at the early stages. Now I'm also kind of proud. We're going to talk a little about the political ramifications here. And today, some of the press, when the president was on there, and I hate to say this, they're almost all millennials. It really bothers me because I don't see a lot of intellect coming out of that group in terms of the questioning. But the one gal got up there and says, when are you going to call out the military to lock everybody down? Well, first of all, that's not the American way. We don't lock people in their houses, and if they come out, arrest them or shoot them or whatever. But the president started in, he said, I don't think that's necessary at this time. And I kind of go, ooh, that's a good answer, but it's not a best answer. And then he said, besides that, it's the governors of the individual states' responsibility, not the federal government's, to determine what each state, how they're going to respond to this. And I thought, now you're talking. I watched Governor Ducey on there, and they were asking him the same question: when are you going to call out the guard to tell everybody stay in, and if they come out, so forth and so on. And he pretty much said the same thing. We're not at that point, and I hope we're not at that point, but that has to be looked at very closely to determine the constitutionality of taking American citizens and locking them in their homes. And that's one thing that scares a lot of people. including myself and this group that I represent here, the Arizona Project people, I know that they will go, oh my God, I can't believe that we could violate our documents that way. And so I think we have to err on the side of caution. As I mentioned, life and death is so permanent and life is so fragile that if we're going to err, we always want to err on the side of life. But we don't want to get to the point where we believe that any time there's a political issue that the governors and the president can call out the military and take our personal rights away at the same time. It's a real balancing act. And Michelle, do you have anything to say about that? You and I have been friends for years.
Well, I think you're really bringing up something that's on a lot of people's minds. It's our personal freedoms, it's our civil liberties, and what better time to challenge those or reduce them or take them away than in an emergency, when people are vulnerable and they're scared, the future's uncertain, they want to follow direction, but they also don't know what they should give up.
Or if it's permanent.
Yeah,
How long is this going to be stretched out?
Look, this is a time where we need to be very, very thoughtful, not reactionary. We need to be proactive. We want to make sure that the policies we're implementing, the declarations of emergencies that we're declaring are reasonable, responsible. There's a focus on an end date, and that there's always a constant desire to make sure that we get ourselves out of this and that we resume regular life. I don't think we should give up any of our freedoms and liberties. That's just not what we do in America, and many people have fought very hard and have sacrificed quite a lot so that we could be here today and have the freedoms we do. I take that very seriously, and to give them up because we are afraid is not something that I think is part of what makes up our American fabric. What we're doing is being proactive, and we're putting in measured policies that, like the doctor said, talked about flattening the curve, reducing the rates for spreading the virus, and that's all very responsible. But these things can get away from us. That's why we have to stay on top of it.
Hey, Ron, can I mention something there?
Freedom, yes.
Sure, Doctor.
So, that made me think of something. And so, obviously the way we prevent ourselves from ever getting that far to martial law or anything like that is prevention. And so I did watch just a day or two ago on Fox News, and it was pretty interesting. It was a statistical analysis of showing one infected individual that didn't know they were infected, because, as you know, there's an incubation period.
Yes.
And that one person could infect 3, could infect 9, and it showed it all the way out to where 4.5 million people could be infected by one single asymptomatic person. So perhaps what we should do is, everybody listening right now should contact 1 or 2 or 3 people to spread the word about why social distancing is so important to flatten that curve. Why don't we, instead of infecting 4.5 million people, infect people with the right knowledge, information to be able to prevent us from ever getting to where we would consider martial law?
Yes. The streets in Phoenix are pretty dead right now. And once again, I'm really proud of my fellow man for the most part, because people are finally getting it, that this is not a hoax, this is deadly. And you never know where this virus, it's an enemy that's totally unseen. You don't know where it is. Connie in here, she's got, if anybody can see, she's got
Surface
all kinds
cleaner.
of surface cleaners and sprays in here, and my gosh, the place smells like like alcohol all the time. And
Sorry, I sprayed all of you
Lysol.
guys. But you won't get sick now.
But I feel comfortable when she comes around because she disinfects everything. You know, she ought to work at the hospital, doctor, working in the operating rooms. She's very thorough.
Fantastic.
But yes, I've 146 countries now have this. This is amazing, and some of the countries have really taken extreme precautions, like the Bahamas, or was it Bermuda? One or the other. You know, it's a small island, so once they get it there, it can really travel. I mean, everybody on the island can get it. And they had their military out, and if you're out without a pass, a reason why you should be out, there can be a fine of $10,000 or 18 months in jail. Oh, wow. That's how serious they're taking it. But once again, I hope we don't get to that point. I think our governor, Governor Ducey, has been very good at a measured response. The other day I had one of our members, Les Landon, contact me and say, you know, they're closing down the truck stops.
Uh-oh.
And that's pretty scary. The state of Pennsylvania closed them all down. So he asked that if I could contact the governor, which I did, and I was quite pleasantly surprised that the governor actually responded to me. And he said, I'm on this. I'm going to have some staff member call you, which he did. And at that time, I sent him a number of photos of our stores over here. We were right next to a Fry's supermarket, and I showed the empty shelves. The idea here with closing this is that you can close that down to pedestrian traffic, but you cannot close this down to heavy haulers, 18-wheelers, CDL people. You must keep those gas stations open for fuel for the truckers. You must keep it open for the rest stops, because they are limited to certain laws as to how long they can drive. Plus, these guys, you can't be driving a truck and making a sandwich at the same time. So you have to have the little restaurant facilities, even if you go over there and they bring it out and you eat it in your 18-wheeler. And so I was real pleased. The governor even mentioned that today in that they were keeping the truck stops open for the truckers, because we don't have a shortage in our fry stores and others. We just have too many people that are hoarding things. And guys, go out there and shop as you normally have shopped. Shop for a week at a time. Leave things for other people. And I've been over there, and I've noticed there's no toilet paper. There's no hand.
There's still no toilet paper.
And the soap sections are gone. The detergents with bleach. You can still get Tide, but you can't get Tide with bleach. You can't even get bleach. Another disinfectant, a lot of people don't know about this, is vinegar. Mm-hmm. And vinegar, believe it or not, a virus cannot live in vinegar. So for those of you that think you're all out of this stuff, if you have vinegar at home, this is just a little tip. If you have vinegar at home, this is another thing that you can use to disinfect your areas. Now, one of the things, Doctor, that we were real pleased with last week after we had you on the show, and you were talking about the masks, and while we were on a break, you had given us another thing about your little microbreweries over there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was mentioning that the hand sanitizers are gone, so all you need is 60% alcohol. So we have distilleries, and at least one that I know of, and they decided to go ahead and start releasing some of the alcohol specifically for production of hand sanitizer. Mm-hmm. So a good way to repurpose, right?
And the thing about it is, Connie was talking from the people that heard that show, that a lot of them were impressed that we weren't just giving statistics and doom and gloom, but we were also providing some assistance so that people could do some other things. This vinegar is another thing. If you have vinegar, that's pretty cool. If you have in a cabinet somewhere, you've got a little bottle of alcohol that you used for one reason or another, it's still good. Alcohol doesn't lose its potency. A matter of fact, vinegar, and I do want to tell you this, if those of you that have vinegar at home and you go to get it out and you see that it's kind of cloudy and it has some goop in it, don't throw it away. That's called mother of vinegar. It is not a bad thing. It's not mold. It helps make the vinegar stronger. So if you have vinegar at home, you can wipe some countertops and that off with your vinegar. So these are the types of things we would like to be able to promote for people. Is that Mike talking there?
I don't think Mike's
I hear
a dog.
Mike. I hear Mike barking. Anyway, any other ideas, Michelle?
Peroxide? What about peroxide? I just noticed I had some hydrogen peroxide.
I don't
Would
know.
that
You'll have
help?
to ask the doctor about
Well, that's-
peroxide.
Oh, yes. Where did he go?
Yeah, I'm not really sure about any of those. I only know about 60% alcohol solution, so even vinegar, I was not certain that killed it. Maybe it does. I have not done the research in that area, so.
Well, I do know that a virus cannot live in vinegar. Now, I don't know, I mean, that's probably putting it in the vinegar, but I would imagine we'll have to check that out. I think that's an interesting thing to look at.
Maybe we should consume They say it makes you lose weight.
No, you can consume vinegar, but there's some
strong.
things here that I don't think if you drink alcohol, you're necessarily going to get this virus out of your way. Now, I did hear a couple of things, doctor, and I don't know how accurate this is, but if you do breathe this stuff and you drink a lot of water, that you can wash a lot of this stuff down into your stomach, where your stomach acids would destroy this. I don't know how, and it said.
I don't
that
think
true?
that's very accurate. So remember, this is a respiratory illness. So it means that you're inhaling it through your mouth or nose into the respiratory tract, separate than your GI tract. So this is going straight into your lungs, seeding into the airway. And it's the spikes. If you look at the actual, the virus, if you look at a picture of it, it looks like it has a little spike with a little ball.
Yes.
Those are what is presumed to have allowed it to go so deep into the respiratory tract and to cause that lower respiratory symptoms.
Yes. I don't know a lot about this medical scenario. All as I know is that I get the flu. It's a respiratory disease, and I know it's very difficult to clear your lungs of that, even with a good expectorant. And I understand from, it might have been my discussion with you, that they've done some autopsies on some people in China, and they found that the mucus gets so thick that they can't clear it from their lungs. And that's one of the things that kills them. I don't know how
Yeah,
true
a
that
lot of
is.
the common symptoms we talked about before, but probably worth repeating, is the deep, dry cough. We're not really talking about like the little tickle in the throat that you get when you have allergies. We're not talking about that. It's a much deeper cold, dry cough, fever, muscle ache, fatigue. We call those myalgias, sore throat. Some GI symptoms can be related, such as diarrhea, abdominal pain. Those are kind of the broad spectrum of symptoms. But those differ from the common flu typically. The common flu certainly causes fever and some muscle aches, but it generally causes more upper respiratory, runny nose, some cough, but it might be, it's a different type of cough. It's not that dry, deep cough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have any cases out there?
So currently, we've had multiple people that we feel are a possibility. We have not had any very ill patients at this juncture, and we have not had any positive tests, although the number of testing that's been actually done, I would wager at this point there's probably been less than 60 patients tested in our area.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to read some numbers here that was reported today. There are 11 counties in Arizona where this virus has now been identified. 2 people have died, 234 have it. And I think we're fortunate that that number is that low, to be honest with you, because being a playground in the winter, people have been out and about a great deal. That's just Arizona. I mean, we're outdoors people, and we contact a lot of people during the day. But here's how the numbers break down. Maricopa, 139, Apache 4, Graham 2, Navajo 25, Pinell 17, Pima 24, Coconino 17, Yuma 1, Cochise 1, Yavapai 3, and Santa Cruz 1. Now, what county are you in? Are you in La Paz or?
We're in Mojave County.
Mojave, okay. Okay, I didn't see that on the list, so you guys must at least be safe for now. That's good.
Well, for now, and I guess careful what you believe or read or see on the internet. There is a website that I've looked at, my wife's looked at a few times, that looks at per state, where the curve is and where we expect it to go. And then from there, you can kind of get a little deeper and you can figure out the potential at-risk counties. And it's interesting that they think that Mojave County might be a high risk because of our age population.
Yes.
They look at people that are, maybe 1/3 or more of the population that's over 65 within a county, which would theoretically put you at higher risk, and look at the amount of hospitals and the density. And we are actually one of the top 3 at-risk counties in the United States based off of that, if you believe that.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, we're about ready to let you go because we're going to have to move on here. Connie, you have anything?
Well, I was out shopping a little bit at Walmart. Of course, I wore one of my masks, and I noticed that in the delis, and I'm, nobody's covering up with anything. And I know there's a shortage of masks, but I would think even a bandana that you could pick up at Walgreens for $1, anything that would keep you from spewing out anything coming from your lungs, your mouth, anything should be able to help. I know it's not as professional as one of these or, medical masks, but I just can't even believe that anywhere you go where they're serving food or taking carry-out, people just aren't covering up at all. Even a scarf would work. I mean, if you spray it with disinfectant, wouldn't that do the trick or at least help? It's got to stifle a little bit.
Well, let me tell you, I'm not always sure about Dr. Oz, but at any rate, he was on. I think he's a real doctor, but I don't know.
Cardiothoracic surgeon, I think.
Oh, okay. At any rate, he said a few things that really were, I think, hit home. It's kind of like you were talking about, people making the food without wearing a mask and talking and spittle getting onto your food.
Literally talking over the food.
Right. But Dr. Oz said one of the things when you order food to be brought to your house, the one thing you should do is like pizza or something in styrofoam, take it out at the door and put it in a container that is clean from your house, and then take the containers that came in the box, the styrofoam, and immediately take it to your garbage outside. And then when you come in, of course, wash down and sanitize yourself. Because if you take a pizza and it could have been perfect when it left, and then the driver that brings it to your home throws it in his car, and you don't know who's been in the car. If it's Uber, I don't even think Uber's working right now, but if Uber and Lyft, you don't know who's been in those vehicles. So you got a box that's in there with your food, get rid of it. So that's another little tip, folks. If you get that, immediately remove the food and put it in a safe container that has been sanitized, and then get rid of the box. When you come back in, sanitize your hand, so forth. Get rid of it.
Same thing with gas stations. That's
the gas pumps.
Spot. Yes. You should fuel your car, and then as you get into your car, sanitize your hands before you touch anything else.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you said that, because we're trying to give little solutions to people, and I have alcohol in a little spray bottle in my car. And whenever I go out, as soon as I get back in, I spray before I even start the car and spray my steering wheel down. And that's a good point. Another thing that is Connie and I had thought about putting this video out, it's out there, is your cell phone. My gosh, your cell phone. How many times do you use your phone. How many times has others said, hey, could I use your phone for a minute? Or, hey, listen, here's Grandpa, or, on the phone. And you're spittle on the phone. I hate to use that term. It kind of sounds gross. But at any rate, that's another thing you need to clean down. And in the restrooms, when you go to the restrooms, you do your duty, clean your hands, wash up, get a paper towel if they have them. Turn off the water with the paper towel after your hands are clean. Take the handle to the door, open it up, discard the paper towel either right at the door if they have it, or somewhere else very close. Get rid of it and make sure that you're not picking up other people's germs. It's really kind of little things that we don't ever think about. I mean, I always do because I don't know, I've been there and been sick a couple times with
My mother
flu.
has got cancer, and she's 83, and she goes even one step further. She literally washes her groceries when she brings them home. She takes them out of the box, wipes them with bleach solution and soapy water, and I thought she was a little neurotic. I guess that's where I get it from, but I think it's great because she's still healthy, she's still alive. She's alone, but that might be just a helpful hint for people out there.
Senator, any comments before we leave?
Well, no, you guys did a great job covering it, and I think the thing to focus on is prevention, and that seems to be the common denominator in all of the talking points is prevention, by making sure you are sanitizing everything and staying away from areas where you may be susceptible.
And just before we leave, there were some really interesting things that I saw today. One of them is the fact that we are now the third most infected nation population-wise, but our death rate is still very low compared to other countries. And they're thinking that it's a number of things that Americans are doing. One of them is the social distancing. Two is that now we're beginning to get on top of this thing. And three, it's because of the citizens voluntarily doing the things that that doctors are saying and that the president is saying. And I think the president, quite frankly, is doing a very good job. Even though I saw Biden today say, when is the president going to get off his butt and do something about this? And I'm thinking, don't you watch? He's on twice a day for an hour each time with all of these doctors and everything. And I'm thinking, where are you at? Why are you guys doing this? Again, that's my political bias. But doctor, we sure appreciate it. And above all, please be careful. I know you know how to be careful, but I wouldn't want to be in your position going in harm's way. So God bless you, sir, for what you do. And we'll be in touch with you again and follow up maybe Wednesday night on Arizona Fighting Back. So appreciate
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate everything you've done, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
You guys have a great night. Be safe, America.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. O'Connor has left the building. We were going to transit over to another subject, but Mr. O'Connor is not here. I think he's out getting a sandwich or something. I don't know.
Oh, he can edit it, right?
So, a couple of things I wanted to talk about real quick, and I know many of you want to hear Michelle, and I do too. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, and that's fact check, because there is so much crap going on out there, and I hate to use that on the air here, but there is so much going on that Trump is getting blamed for, and I want to cover this real quick. Ladies, please join in with me, okay? The Trump administration did not cut monies and money for the CDC, okay? That's the Disease Control Board, okay? That's been going out there that the Trump administration has for the last 3 years cut the budget for the CDC. Wrong. It increased the budget for the last 3 years, okay? Every year he's been in office, they've increased the money for the Disease Control Board. 2, Trump did not get rid of the, now there's Mr. O'Connor. How's your sandwich? Okay, he's not there. We were going to take a small break, sir, and when you get a minute, we'll do that. Trump did not get rid of the pandemic. Now, this is something that's been going around, really torqued me off. First of all, it's the United Nations, which generally torques me off in the first place. And so it was the Security Council, and they had the World Health Organization, part of the United Nations Security Council, and they saying, well, Trump dissolved it. Well, first of all, I don't know how Trump could dissolve the United Nations. One. Two, that's not true either. They moved it from the Security Council, and I don't understand why it would have been under the Security Council in the first place, but it was, and they just renamed it. So there's another lie. Three, Trump did not refuse kits from the World Health Organization, testing kits. The World Health Organization doesn't even provide kits. So here's another. The kits are usually made up by each nation, but it certainly isn't made up by the World Health Organization. Trump did not muzzle the scientists in China. He did not muzzle our scientists, but China muzzled theirs. But Trump's getting blamed for that as well, that we don't have all the information we needed. That's because the Chinese didn't provide it. And so, guys, if you turn the TV on every day, about 9 o'clock and about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the president is on there taking questions himself, and he has all of his medical people around him. Okay, Trump did not tell governors that they were on their own. The governors were to get their own ventilators, and if they could not, the federal government would assist in getting them. Another lie. Trump did not call the virus a hoax. What he did say was a hoax is that the Democrats were trying to make it a political issue that was Trump's doing. That was the hoax. It wasn't Trump's doing at all. It was the Chinese doing. And of course, you all know right now that saying that the Chinese virus is racist. That's the biggest joke I've ever heard. And Trump said, well, the reason I call it the Chinese virus is because it's from China.
Yes, it sure is.
Okay, the American people are actually approve of the president's handling. Almost 80% of Americans are behind him to some degree or another, and almost 60% are strongly behind his actions. The president said Google was working on to create a virus website, and the press said no, that's not true. Well, that's fake news also. Google is and has, it's probably up by now, a website. So that's another thing. And then the other day, one of the reporters said that the president was giving America a false hope when he talked about the how do you say that? I never could figure out the name of medicine. Chloroquine. And he says, you're giving people false hope. Well, just before I got here, I had heard that there were a few people that have taken it, and they're doing much, much better. And I believe Wednesday they're going to start giving it out to people.
So, it was an anti-malarial drug, correct?
Yes.
Which means there should be some of it around.
We need to take a break. Don't go away, because Michelle Ugenti is going to talk to us about some voting laws. Be right back.